All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep on wildfires in the greater LA
All
area.
right, let's do it.
And look, this isn't just going to be, the same old fire is bad stuff.
Right.
We're going way past that. I mean, we've got some historical accounts, research articles, and frankly, some of what we found is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue.
Yeah.
What's so interesting to me is how the LA area isn't just, vulnerable to wildfires.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the whole landscape is set up for them.
Okay, so explain that. What makes it such a tinderbox?
Well, think about the terrain for a second.
Okay.
You've got steep mountains, dry valleys, and then coastal plains all crammed together.
Right.
That right there makes firefighting a total nightmare,
Yeah, especially in those canyons, right?
especially in the canyons. It's really tough.
So when we talk about, those high-risk zones, are we talking about like forests or is it more like where the wilderness is right next to houses?
It's that wildland urban interface.
Hmm.
Think about places like the San Gabriels, the Santa Monica Mountains,
Right.
even parts of the Angeles National Forest. These are places that are just constantly on edge, and especially when those Santa Ana winds come in.
Oh man, those winds. I remember one fall I was driving and honestly it felt like my car was gonna like lift off the ground.
Wow.
But seriously, how do those winds make these fires so much worse?
So picture this, right?
Okay.
You've got this bone-dry air
Yes.
that's being heated up as it comes down those mountains, and it can reach speeds of up to 70 miles an hour.
Wow.
It's not just pushing those flames along either.
Right.
It's carrying embers
Oh
for
wow.
miles.
So they're starting fires all over.
Spot fires everywhere. It's like trying to fight a 100-armed
Oh,
monster.
okay, yeah, that's terrifying. And it's
Yeah.
not just the wind, right? I've heard that even like the types of plants out here
Yeah.
actually make things worse.
It's the chaparral, this dense shrubby stuff that just thrives in this dry climate.
Okay.
But here's the thing. It's full of these highly flammable oils.
No.
So it not only burns easily, but it burns really hot and fast.
So it's like nature's kindling.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. So we've got the terrain, the wind, and the flammable plants. And then, of course, good old-fashioned human error, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, I know you're right, but it's still shocking to hear. It's easy to forget how dry it really is here.
Yeah. A simple mistake,
Right,
like a campfire that's not put out all the way,
right.
or a cigarette butt, or sparks from equipment, and you can have a really huge fire.
Yeah, it sounds like we're setting the stage for disaster. So let's actually talk about some of the fires that have happened. I know LA has a, long and intense history with this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And you know what's interesting?
What?
By looking at these past fires, we actually start to see these patterns and how our understanding of wildfire risk has or hasn't evolved.
Okay, let's start with one that really stands out to me.
Okay.
The 1933 Griffith Park fire. It was just heartbreaking.
It was devastating. 29 lives were lost, many of them park workers and firefighters who were battling the blaze.
Right.
And what makes it even more tragic is many of those deaths were because the wind suddenly shifted.
Oh, wow.
So it was just a really stark reminder of just how unpredictable and how dangerous these fires can be.
And it's not even like it was in one of those, like a wildland urban interface zone.
No.
This was right in the middle of one of LA's most beloved parks.
Exactly. And that fire had a really lasting impact. It led to major changes in fire safety regulations for all the city's parks.
Okay.
And it really emphasized that firefighters needed better training and equipment.
But even with those changes, the fires kept coming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a few decades later, you have the 1961 Bel Air fire,
Right.
which proved that even wealthy areas weren't immune.
Right. That was a big turning point. Over 500 homes were destroyed.
Wow.
And it just shattered this illusion that, if you were affluent, you were somehow protected from wildfire risk.
Right.
And here's something interesting. It was that fire that made the city implement stricter building codes, especially in those hillside areas.
Okay.
So requiring things like fire-resistant roofing.
So at least some good came out of that tragedy.
Right.
And it seems like, each of these big fires sort of pushed the city to adapt a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like a constant process of learning and adjusting.
Right. Yeah.
And as the city grew and expanded into these high-risk areas,
Right.
the stakes just kept getting higher.
And speaking of high stakes, the 1993 Sierra Madre fire really showed how tough it is to fight fires in those foothill communities.
That one was a tough one. It burned through over 1,000 acres,
Wow.
destroyed homes, and tragically killed a firefighter.
Right.
It really showed that we needed better coordination between all the different firefighting agencies,
Right.
and also the importance of programs to reduce fuel in communities.
Okay, yeah, like defensible space.
Yeah, exactly, like creating defensible space.
It seems like these fires are almost like this force of nature, you know? Yeah. They're shaping not just like the landscape, but also how we live here and how we prepare.
Totally. They're a constant presence here.
Right.
And to understand them, we need to understand the history.
Okay, so we talked about the terrain, the wind, and the vegetation, and then also the human error.
Right.
We also talked about some of these big fires, but what about what actually causes them?
So like we said, human activity is the biggest cause.
Right.
But there's a wide range of how these fires get started.
Okay.
Sometimes it's as simple as a spark from a lawnmower hitting a rock.
Seriously?
Yeah, on a really dry day. That's all it takes.
A lawnmower? That's crazy. It just shows how dry it is out here.
Exactly. And then there's the more obvious things like campfires that aren't watched.
Right.
Cigarettes, fireworks.
Yeah?
But another big one, and this is where it gets a little controversial, is electrical equipment failures.
So like power lines and stuff like that?
Exactly.
Huh?
Aging infrastructure, especially power lines, they can spark in these dry, windy conditions.
Right.
And that can easily ignite the dry brush.
And cause a huge fire.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of debate about the role of utility companies and whether they're doing enough to prevent it.
So it's not just about individuals being careful.
Yeah.
It's about infrastructure and maintenance.
Yeah, on a much larger scale.
Now, I imagine lightning strikes play a role too, right?
Yeah, lightning is a natural cause of fire, but
Yeah.
here in Southern California, it's actually a pretty small percentage of wildfires compared to those caused by people.
Okay, so it's complex,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's humans, directly or indirectly, that are really driving this whole problem.
Right, pretty much.
So with all of that in mind, what are we doing to fight back against this constant threat?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've learned a lot from these past fires, and we've got a lot of incredible people on the front lines battling these things with a lot of bravery and skill.
Yeah.
But we're learning it's not just about putting fires out.
Right.
It's about understanding them,
Right.
adapting to them, and learning to live with them.
Right. And
Yeah.
keeping our communities safe.
Exactly.
Okay, well said. And that is exactly what we're going to explore in part 2 of this deep dive.
Right.
We're going to get up close and personal with the brave folks who risk their lives to fight these fires, and we're going to dive into the strategies and technologies that are being used to get ahead of these flames.
Sounds good.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into wildfires
Wow.
here in the greater LA area.
Yeah.
In part 1, we talked about, those perfect storm conditions that make this region so vulnerable. We talked about the history,
Right.
some really devastating fires,
Yeah.
and then that, sobering reality that it's humans who
Yeah.
are often the ones who start these things.
Right.
But now I want to know what happens when that spark turns into a raging wildfire.
Right.
Who are the people that are on the front lines
Uh,
battling these things?
Well, it really takes a ton of courage and strategy and more innovation these days.
Yeah.
So when a wildfire breaks out in LA, the first ones there are going to be the LAFD.
Right. The Los Angeles Fire Department.
You probably know them as LAFD.
Right.
They're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
They're trained.
Yeah.
They're equipped to handle everything from house fires to these massive wildfires we're talking about.
Right. But I imagine fighting a wildfire in San Gabriel's, all those steep slopes and rugged terrain, that's got to be way different
Totally different.
than putting out a kitchen fire in West Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. Totally different skills.
Right.
Strategies, equipment.
Yeah.
And you need to work with other agencies.
Okay.
Seattle Fire,
Right.
the U.S. Forest Service,
Okay.
sometimes even fire departments in the neighboring counties.
Wow.
They have these mutual aid agreements
Okay.
where they share resources and manpower during these big events.
So it's really a coordinated effort.
Oh, yeah, big time.
But what does that actually look like?
So you've got the direct attack, which is what most people think of.
Right, like firefighters with the hoses.
Yeah, firefighters on the ground,
Digging hoses.
digging those fire lines,
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
box the fire in.
Okay.
But the terrain here, that makes it really tough.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Those slopes and canyons,
Yeah.
that can't be easy.
Not at all. And that's where aerial firefighting comes in.
Okay, so the helicopters and the planes,
Helicopters,
dropping the water and the retardant.
fixed wing aircraft,
Right.
dropping water, dropping retardant.
Yeah.
It's essential.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that. It's like a ballet.
It's pretty amazing. It's a delicate dance.
Yeah.
Those pilots, they have to deal with crazy winds and the terrain, and then they've got to coordinate with the crews on the ground.
Oh, wow.
So those drops are effective.
Yeah, but there's got to be more to it than just dropping water on a fire.
Oh, yeah, for sure. One strategy is to create these fire breaks,
Okay.
which are basically strips of land where they clear all the vegetation.
So there's nothing to burn.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps slow the fire down or stop it.
Okay.
You can use bulldozers for that,
Right.
hand crews,
Okay.
and even sometimes controlled burns.
Wait, hold on. They start fires
I know it sounds crazy.
to fight fires?
Yeah, prescribed burns.
Okay.
They're super important for managing wildfire risk.
So how does that work?
So they burn off the extra vegetation, but they do it very carefully.
Right.
So it's controlled.
Okay.
That way, when a wildfire comes along, there's less fuel for it to burn.
So less intense, easier to manage.
Exactly.
So it is kind of like fighting fire with fire.
Yeah, but strategically.
Right, in a controlled way.
Right. It's not just about suppressing fires.
Right.
It's about understanding how fire plays a part in these ecosystems.
It's that whole shift in thinking that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
That fire isn't always bad. Sometimes it can actually be good.
Right. Sometimes
Well,
it's beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about technology.
Okay.
Because I've heard that there's some pretty amazing advancements in how we predict and monitor wildfire risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is huge in our fight against these fires.
Okay.
We're using things like AI now,
Okay.
artificial intelligence,
Right.
satellite imagery,
Okay.
even social media.
Wait, social media? Seriously?
Yeah, it's amazing what you can learn from that data.
Okay.
People are posting about seeing smoke or downed power lines.
Right.
Yeah, that can be an early warning for firefighters.
So it's like a crowdsourced fire detection system.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. So it's like having millions of eyes out there.
Yeah.
But what about the higher tech stuff?
Okay.
Like the satellites and the AI?
Okay, so satellites can show us what's happening with the fires in real time.
Wow.
So firefighters can track them.
Okay.
They can even sort of anticipate where they're going to go.
Right.
And you can also use them to map fuel loads,
Uh.
which helps you figure out where the high-risk areas are.
Right.
And then you've got AI, which can analyze all this data,
Right.
weather patterns,
Mm-hmm.
how dry the vegetation is,
Okay.
even historical data about fires.
So it can predict where they might start.
Yeah, and how they might behave.
So it's like a crystal ball.
Yeah, but one that's based on science.
Right. It sounds like we're finally starting to get ahead of these things instead of just reacting to them.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
But technology is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
We also have to rethink how we manage that wildland-urban interface.
Okay. The zone where the homes and the wilderness meet.
Yeah, exactly. Those areas where the houses are built right up against the forest.
Right. It's kind of blurry, that line.
Yeah, it's blurry and it's super vulnerable.
Yeah.
So one thing we can do is create more defensible space around the homes.
Okay. I've heard that term, defensible space.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
It starts with the home itself,
Okay.
using fire-resistant building materials,
Like what?
tile roofs,
Okay.
stucco siding,
Okay.
things like that.
That makes a big difference.
Huge difference. It's also important to keep your gutters clean
Okay.
and make sure there's a zone around your house that doesn't have anything that can burn,
Okay.
like plants or other materials.
So you're thinking about fire safety from the ground up.
Literally.
Literally. What about landscaping?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people in LA love their gardens.
Right.
But that can be a fire hazard.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So you want to pick plants that are fire resistant.
Okay.
Native plants are good for that.
Okay.
They tend to be more adapted to fire.
Right.
And you also want to space those plants out
Okay.
and preen them.
Yeah.
So there's less fuel.
So it's finding that balance
Mhm.
between having a beautiful garden and keeping things safe.
Yeah.
But it's not just individual homeowners,
Right.
right? It's about communities working together.
Community action is huge.
Yeah.
Things like having the neighbors get together
Right.
and clearing brush,
Right.
creating community wildfire protection plans,
Okay.
and advocating for those stricter building codes.
So learning from other communities
Yeah.
who have been through this,
Yeah.
are there any success stories out there?
Oh, yeah, there's a bunch.
Okay.
There are communities in California that are doing some really innovative things,
Okay.
like using goats to eat the vegetation.
Goats, really?
Yeah.
That's
They're
obscure.
creating early warning systems.
Okay.
They're even using drones to monitor the fire risk.
It sounds like we're finally starting to get creative with this.
We have to.
Yeah.
The old ways aren't enough. We've got to be bold,
Yeah.
innovative, and work together if we want to make LA truly fire resilient.
Well said. It's clear that this is a multifaceted battle, right? You've got the firefighters on the front lines.
Yeah.
You've got the cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
You've got the community action. But I'm curious about the human side of this.
Okay.
What about the emotional and psychological toll
Uh-huh.
that these fires take
Right.
on people and communities.
Right.
And that's what we're going to dig into in the final part of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to look at those personal stories of resilience and recovery and the power of the human spirit when faced with these incredible fires. Welcome back to our deep dive, the final part of our look at wildfires in the greater LA area.
Yeah.
We've talked about, the science behind these fires,
Mm-hmm.
the incredible work that firefighters do to combat them,
Yeah.
and the, really innovative strategies that are being used to try and create a more fire-resilient future.
Right.
But it's easy to get lost in all the data and the technology and forget that there's a human side to all of this.
It's true, yeah. Behind all those numbers, acres burned, homes destroyed, those are real people's lives.
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the physical damage, but the emotional and psychological impact, that's going to be profound.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Imagine having to flee your home
Yeah.
in the middle of the night,
Right.
not knowing if it's even going to be there when you get back.
Right. Or seeing everything engulfed in flames.
Yeah, it's a level of trauma that most of us can't even imagine.
Right. And even for those who haven't gone through a fire directly, just the constant threat, the smoke,
Right.
it's got to create a lot of anxiety.
It does, yeah.
Mhm.
Living with that kind of stress, wondering when the next fire is going to happen, it can really wear you down.
Yeah. So how do people deal with this? What resources are there to help them heal and rebuild their lives?
Well, there are a number of organizations out there that provide support to wildfire survivors.
Okay.
They offer things like crisis counseling,
Okay.
financial assistance,
Right.
even practical help with rebuilding.
Mm.
The Red Cross, for example, they often set up shelters and provide emergency aid after a fire.
Right, right. And there are mental health professionals too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People who specialize in trauma and PTSD.
That's exactly. They can really help people process what they've been through and give them coping mechanisms.
And I imagine community support is really important too.
It is, yeah. In times of crisis, you see people come together and help each other out.
Right, neighbors, helping neighbors.
Exactly.
Sharing resources, emotional support.
Yeah, those connections make people feel less alone, more hopeful.
It's a good reminder that even in the midst of all this devastation, there's that human spirit of resilience.
Yeah.
But how do they rebuild that sense of resilience long term?
That's the key question, and it's something communities all across California are trying to figure out.
Yeah.
One thing is preparedness. Not just reacting when fires happen,
Right.
but doing things ahead of time to reduce the risks.
Right. Building those fire-adapted communities.
Exactly. And we talked about some of those things earlier. Creating defensible space, choosing fire-resistant building materials, community wildfire protection plans, all of that.
Right. But it sounds like resilience also means acknowledging the psychological impact
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and making sure there's support for mental health.
We need to make it okay to talk about these things,
Right.
Especially after a disaster like a wildfire.
To ask for help.
Exactly. People need to know that it's okay to ask for help and that there are resources out there for them.
And maybe part of it is also about, remembering that sense of community.
Absolutely. Strong social connections,
Oh.
having people you can rely on,
Uh-huh.
feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Those things are so important when you're dealing with stress and trauma.
It's about sharing the responsibility for each other.
Yeah. And for the land we all share.
It's a powerful message. And it kind of brings us full circle,
Yeah.
to the question we've been asking. Can LA truly become fire resilient?
I think it can, but it's going to take a big change in how we think and act.
Yeah.
It's not about beating fire. It's about learning to live with it.
Right.
To minimize the risk and to protect our communities,
Right.
it's about being innovative, working together, and having a deep respect for nature.
Well said. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
From the science to the firefighters to the personal stories.
Yeah,
We've really explored a lot.
we have.
And if there's one thing I want you to take away from all of this,
Yeah.
it's that we're not powerless.
Yeah.
We can understand the risks.
Right.
We can be innovative. We can support each other. And we can take action.
Yeah.
And that's how we create a safer future.
Yeah, for everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of wildfires in LA. We encourage you to keep learning and to get involved in your community. Let's all work together to create a fire-resilient future for Southern California.